I hope you're all well. Good to see you. Happy Sunday. I hope you're all awake. I don't know whether some of you were watching matches yesterday into the wee hours of this morning. I don't know. I definitely, when it gets to 12 midnight, I'm out, man. I'm in my bed. So hopefully you're awake. Just stay awake for the next 35 minutes, yeah? Promise? Yeah, there's a lot of sports around this time of the year. Just in case you're not sure, I'm here to tell you the summer is here, people. Yeah, just look at me, yeah, guys. Yeah, just have faith. However, I'm glad that there are some jackets on the side in case I need it at the end of the day because this temperature tripolarness, I don't get it. But yeah, have faith. Summer will come. Yeah, believe. Yeah, yeah, believe it. Yeah. All right. So we've been going through a series called Your Move, and it's based on First Samuel. Guys, just to say, AV guys, the monitor up front, I can't see anything, even though I have my notes all here. I'm just saying, if you can help me out, because I'm gonna have to read a few verses. So we're doing a series called Your Move, and it's based on First Samuel. So we've gone through a bunch of chapters so far, and today we'll be um, looking at God is victorious. Will you overcome? And if you notice, the theme of your movie is a sort of chess, a motif, which sort of tells you, okay, God has done something or has moved, and what exactly will. Yeah, all right, I can hear myself. Thank you very much. All right, so today's the title of today's message is God is victorious. Will you overcome? You may have a sense of what I might be talking about. The songs or singing, they're all leading to a big sort of crescendo. The story so far is, if you remember what Andrew was sharing last week. So Samuel, the prophet, had anointed David because God had basically, essentially given up on Saul because Saul had disappointed God by disobeying. And so God switched his anointing essentially from Saul to David, and so Samuel anointed him. Remember that Samuel also thought, like most people would, that the people who look coolest, who look big and strong, would be the one that God would anoint. But actually, that's not how God works. He works by looking on the inside. And David was a guy in the back of the house somewhere tending some sheep, and that's who God actually chose. And then God's Spirit came on David, and I guess it went back to doing what it did. That's a message right there. It didn't become king immediately. He just was anointed and then carrying on doing what it was doing. But then we read last week about a spirit coming on Saul to torment him. And this was a really horrible experience. It was sort of mental health, that sort of thing. And Saul needed someone to help him through this bout of essentially craziness, if you were. And then someone said, "Oh, there's someone I know. He's out somewhere in the backfields," and they basically got David to come. David did an internship, and he passed, and then he got the full-time job to keep playing for David, sorry, for Saul. So today we move into a story in 1 Samuel 17, which is the one about David and Goliath, which many people would know about. This has become sort of a phrase used in popular culture. So if someone's facing a Goliath situation, you know that they're facing a big, massive crisis. That's really what we're leading up to. Since when the Sporting World Cup season, this took me back to when I was a little boy. I think it was 1988 or 89, something like that. Has anyone ever heard of the Miracle of Daman? No, you wouldn't. I'll tell you about it, guys. Yes. Yeah. So I think I was 9 or so, and Nigeria was playing Russia, USSR, and this is Russia, man. They were gonna whoop you. It was literally David versus Goliath, and we all sat to watch. It was, I think, the under-19s or something, and lo and behold, yeah, Russia scored 1, scored 2, scored 3. 4. At that point, you just switch off the TV, man. I mean, TV wasn't on 24/7 in those days. So when it was on, you're like, it must count. But you don't want to be watching TV when you're getting whooped. So you switch off the TV and just went to garden, outside playing football by ourselves just to redeem the situation yourself. But after a while, you kind of heard this sort of, when you hear this sort of sounds and it lasts for 3-5 seconds, that must be us, you know? There's a hope. And then you're like, well, even if it's us, it's 4-1, what's the point? So you gave up and you carried on with your football. And then, 10 minutes later, another, it's like, you know what? Let me go check this thing out. So you went back inside and turned on the TV and, it was 4-2. Okay, well, at least there's some pride being saved here. And then 4-3. And then 4-4, Nigeria went ballistic. Like, yeah, even if we lost the game, at least we came back and drew with them. But in the end, they went to penalties and Nigeria won. Yeah, won. So this story reminds me of when you have a tiny little country or a team playing a big league team. It's like Arsenal playing Man U. Sorry, Arsenal. I was intended. It's like Man U or Arsenal playing some Redbridge FC or Romford FC, something like that. And the little team coming out and whooping them big time. That's what we're talking about here. But in the case of this story of David versus Goliath, there are other biblical crises that we can actually remember. So there's Daniel, in the lion's den, his friends in the fiery furnace. There's the Israelites in Egypt trying to get out. There are many more examples, when you read through the Old Testament. In the New Testament, I remember Peter being thrown in prison, and he was going to be killed, and he was miraculously rescued. So we have many of these examples in the Bible. And so let's turn to this David versus Goliath story. And at this point, I'm going to have to bring out actually, I'm going to step aside because it'll be easy to see it on the screen. So we'll read through 1 Samuel 17, verses 1 to 11, 32 to 37, and 41 to 50. So here we go. Right, so now the Philistines gathered their forces for war and assembled at Socoh in Judah. They pitched camp at Ephes Dammim between Socoh and Azekah. Saul and the Israelites assembled and camped in the valley of Elah and drew up their battle line to meet the Philistines. The Philistines occupied one hill and the Israelites another, with the valley between them. A champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. His height was 6 cubits and a span. Basically, was big. He had a bronze helmet, and on his head wore a coat of scale armor of bronze weighing 5,000 shekels. On his legs, he wore bronze greaves, and a bronze javelin was slung on his back. His spear shaft was like a weaver's rod, and its iron point weighed 600 shekels. His shield bearer went ahead of him. Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." Then the Philistines said, "This day I defy the armies of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other." On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. Then verse 32. So David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine." So by this point, David had arrived on the scene. He wasn't there before. "Your servant will go and fight him." Saul replied, "You are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." Then 41. Meanwhile, the Philistine with his shield bearer in front of him kept coming closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was little more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome. They still had to put these lines in. I think it's Samuel doing this, guys. And he despised him. He said to David, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And the Philistines cursed David by his gods. "Come here," he said, "and I will give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals." David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I'll give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." As the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and stone, without a sword in his hand, and he struck down the Philistine and killed him. Father God, we thank you for this word. It's sort of familiar. We know of the story, but in it, Lord, you have gems for us. Words, Lord, that you want us to focus on. Truth, Lord, that are eternal. And I pray that you make it relevant for this very day. In Jesus' name. Amen. So, yeah, this story is quite familiar. Although when we were the Student Connect group, there was someone who didn't know about this. And so you can't assume things. You have to sort of read the Bible. You can't expect other people to tell you these stories. You've got to read these things. And I think sometimes just reading through it, you see things that maybe others didn't point out or what you didn't see before. So it's always good to engage with Scripture. So there are a few lessons I want to draw out of what we've just read. The first one is spiritual discernment, or lack of it, has consequences. So spiritual discernment, or the lack of it, has consequences. When you think about Saul and the rest of the Israelite army, what these guys saw was a physical reality. And I think we would all have seen this ourselves if we were there. You would see this person is big and strong, and therefore it is very likely that that will strike some fear into your heart. If you were the same size as Goliath, I doubt that you'd be worried. I doubt that the Israelites would have been worried. But sometimes knowing too much can be a problem. Sometimes knowing our normal knowledge can actually work against us. And it's not a bad thing to have knowledge, but even in that knowledge, you're sometimes not safe. It can actually be the thing that works against you. So natural human knowledge, or what you can see physically, or what you believe the issue to be, is not necessarily the truth. There's more to actually what we see physically ourselves. So the lens that we look at our situations, our world through, is quite important. Whether it's politics, our workplaces, things that we face in life, this matters as well. In our household, some of these people are beginning to talk about, watching certain films. Let's say someone comes to you and try to argue with you that, an 18 film is okay. And you're like, whose 18 is it? Who decided on the 18? I know it's the same number, but the 18 we know is a bit different from the 18 the boards know. So you have to choose how you see the world. So the lens that we look at, I'm giving the example of films, the lens that you view the world through is different from the lens that they are using. I remember going with some of my friends to watch a movie when I was in uni. I wouldn't even do the honor of giving you the name of the film because it's not worth the breath, that God's given me. So it was packed with A stars or A-listers, whatever, and I was this must be a decent film. When this film started going, halfway through the film, I was looking at the fire alarm, man. Like, I'm not gonna get back to my house, my hostel or whatever, and be praying out for cleansing of my spirit. I don't think this is nonsense. but the rating would have been okay. So the rating that we look at the world, sorry, the lens through which we look at the world through, it's different when you're a Christian versus when you're not a Christian. I'm just being real here. So let's be careful that what we see, we look beyond it and actually see what the spiritual, with some real spiritual discernment in terms of what we encounter. When you look at how Jesus talked about virtues and the Beatitudes, I don't think that that's the key to success in the workplace, guys. Those rules don't really work in the dog-eat-dog world that we have in the workplace. They don't really serve you well. They're not like Caesar's rules. These are kingdom rules. So if you choose to embrace a lens of the world, then when a spiritual issue comes around, those things that have worked for you in a secular environment may not work very well for you. It's sort of like looking at a tiny parasite, with a microscope. And it was tiny before, but because you're looking at it through a microscope now, it looks big. Suddenly it's like, oh my God, this thing's big. The reverse is true. These huge things in the sky, planets, whatever, you look at the moon, obviously a telescope will make them small and put them in your reach, but they're all different. It depends on what we're using to look at these things. That determines how our response is. So if you look at Goliath and all you have to bring to the battle is some sort of secular human approach, then the result is most likely going to be some fear. Because you don't have anything else to come to the battle with. It's all secular interpretation, and that would completely kind of eat up one's mind. So if we don't have good spiritual discernment to look at an issue with, we're basically on our own. That's the lesson from this. When we look at David, you can see that this guy's language was more reminiscent of someone who didn't see what the other guys were seeing. He was talking about define the living God. The language is more like a pastor's or some priest's words, even though he wasn't really one. Whereas the rest of the army and Saul weren't really using that sort of language. I wonder what spiritual issues we're actually missing when we look at our lives and the world around us. When we look at what's happening in the UK with some of the political nonsense, is it just people doing stupid things, or is there a spirit behind the craziness that we're observing? I mean, that's something we really need to think about. So the missing root issue actually is, and honestly, I think we can learn. This is going to be a bit controversial. We can learn maybe more from Saul than David. We may be able to learn more from what Saul did wrong, because David just seems like, yeah, okay, everybody knows that I did right. But sometimes it's good to know what you did wrong. And I think Saul lacked real confidence in God because he wasn't really a God guy. I'll get to it in a second. Saul wasn't really, you couldn't say, oh yeah, name your top 10 God guys. Saul wouldn't come up. That was really the issue. So the fear that you're seeing in this passage is because of this gap that was missing, because he didn't have that spiritual discernment. Now, when I say God wasn't a God guy, Saul wasn't a God guy. It leads me on to the second point, which is something Andrew dwelt on a lot last week. And the second point is that we should prepare for battle away from the limelight. There's that book, Outliers, by Malcolm what's his name? Gladwell, yeah. Outliers. I remember even attending some book clubs back in the day when I was in Lagos, traveling a lot. And the book club was called Outliers because the book had a big impact. And the main thrust of this book is usually the people that we say are geniuses, innate genius, born like this, overnight success, blah, blah, blah. They've spent, 10,000 hours practicing. Yeah. So before the Beatles blew up, they were playing in bars in Hamburg for like 8 hours, dodgy sets, grimy, whatever. Ed Sheeran, I remember being on the show, got them to play a YouTube clip of him when he was, 3-4 years before that, and they didn't sound good. But what we know today is, he's won this award, is amazing, can sing, whatever. I think some people maybe were geniuses when they were born, like Whitney, but for everybody else, all right, you got to put in the hours. So it takes time to actually get to know someone. One of the guys at work in my team, good guy, borderline genius kind of guy. I noticed that in his calendar, I'm supposed to be his boss, right? So I should know his calendar. I noticed in the calendar every day from, I think it's from 9 to 10 or 8 to 9, we start work at 8, guys. So, I mean, I noticed that every single day is booked out. And it's not with me. So what's it doing? So I'm like, listen, we need to have a quick chat, just to hear what you're doing. I don't want to be a bad guy, bad boss, just level with me. So I know, so I can defend you if something comes up. You know what he told me? He said, oh yeah, I just spent like an hour. I spent an hour every day just practicing on leak code. This is basically, this genius is practicing his coding for 1 hour every day. Man, I was like, it's okay. Just let the conversation stop right there. My fury turned to the other guys in the team, like, guys, you were trying to be like this guy. This guy's doing 1 hour a day. Like, he's the main. I was so humbled. Like, this guy is the North Star. And he's doing 1 hour a day of practice. I mean, I was so bowled over by this stuff. So it is true that if we don't spend time actually investing in something away from the limelight with God, we are going to end up potentially like the Sauls and his brother and David's brothers, who just didn't have the ability to read the room properly when Goliath showed up. And if you notice, David's brothers, if you read the story fully, they actually didn't think that he belonged to the battlefield. They were like, what are you doing here? Shouldn't you be back there still doing what you're supposed to do, cleaning the house or sheep or whatever? On this one, you can't blame people because they wouldn't know what you and God were doing. So it's not really, I think the David's brothers thing is a bit of a distraction. They just didn't know that David was spending time with God. And that cannot be the barometer with which you check whether you're growing. Other people wouldn't know. It's you and God that will know. Sometimes I joke in the Student Connect. I say that, supposedly we're Christians here, but who knows whether I'm a Christian? Because who really knows whether you're walking with God? You can talk all the talk. I can preach this message as much as I want, but it doesn't mean that I'm actually a child of God. I mean, just I've done a good AI research on this topic, right? That is not proof of me walking with Jesus. So even if someone doesn't really bring faith to the room because they think that maybe you're not really someone who can pray about an issue, don't worry about them. The real litmus test is what you and God do in secret or in private. So people will make assumptions about us. They are not the enemy. Yeah, the enemy is someone else. It's called Satan. So this hidden preparation is called Bible reading. The hidden preparation is called Bible reading. Prayer, private prayer, solitude. These are the things that build your confidence in God. I know I'm making a bit of a joke about this, but if you can take one thing away from this message, read your Bible. Honestly, that's what this thing is all about, being close to God. I think it was also in Connect that Elisa said, and I'm beginning to steal from what she said about Saul, when I said Saul was not a God guy. In a very stark, humbling, sad way, Saul didn't actually have a relationship with God. If you think about it, Saul really didn't have a relationship with God. He relied on other people to have a connection with God. Okay, you just think about that. So it's almost like coming to church and saying, no, I'm always going to depend on someone else to pray for me. I'm always going to depend on someone else to pick songs I can sing. That is not a relationship with God. And it's so bad that even after Samuel died, Saul still went to a witch to speak to Samuel's spirit who was dead. So, who tells you that there is something broken and missing in Samuel's life? Saul's life. We don't want to be like that. Don't be Saul. Yeah? Have a genuine relationship with God. Stephen Bartlett, the Diary of a CEO guy, always says things that drive up clicks. Yeah, but there's something recently that people are going on and on about something to do with wine. That's not the point I'm trying to make. But anyway, he had John Lennox on, the Oxford mathematician professor guy. Right? And it was a very long conversation, and Stephen said that a lot of his friends have become Christians, basically, and he's wondering what on earth is going on with these friends. He admitted at the very end of the interview that all these Christians, including John, there's just something about them. There's something about you, there's something about them that is just peaceful, endearing, loving. Yeah. But there was one thing that struck me that John said when Stephen said it's sort of like an agnostic, skeptic. And John said, yeah, skeptic. He gave him the Greek, all the behind it. And then he said, the original meaning of this word refers to someone who is actively, intelligently inquiring about stuff. And he encouraged Stephen to carry on doing this. And then John said, you see, the thing about someone who's a skeptic, and maybe this is for you if you're not a Christian or you're still on a journey, it said, if you are ever going to know a person, you've got to begin to give up your distance. Man, it's safe if you're there, I know God, I can talk about him and his songs, but if you're going to know someone, you have to give up that safety thing that you have between you and the person. And so if you're seeking for God or chasing God and you're doing it from a distance, I'm sorry, it's not going to work. You're going to have to eventually give up this safety barrier you put between yourself and God and get closer and closer with the risk of maybe burning up. If you don't do it, you're going to keep on remaining safe and not knowing God. The same thing is true for Christians. If you keep doing the whole, let me be safe, I don't have time, what's going to happen is you're not going to know God well. It's a hard word, but it's true. The third point is spiritual battles require spiritual weapons. We've unfortunately had some issues in our house in the last 20 years with leaks. So, terrible stuff. So one of the plumbers, I remember when he was in our house, he saw a flathead screw. I was like, gosh, this horrible screw head's terrible. Can we just have the Phillips? Why can't they make them Phillips? Because Phillips is the best one. Because, the Phillips screwdriver is a good tool, but it's not going to do a good job when there's a flathead screw there. And the reverse is true. If it is a Phillips one and you're trying to use a flat one, you can, but you just know deep inside there's this sort of, gosh, can I just get a Phillips screwdriver? That's what's going on with you. The same thing is what we see in this story with the gear that Saul was going to give to David. It's a gear that you use to go fight, proper men. So they gave it to David, and the guy put it on, and it basically became a flathead for a Phillips. It was a good tool. Someone who was bigger would have used it, but it just wasn't the right thing. And so there's a danger sometimes when we face, whether it's secular issues at work or whatever, that we overanalyze these things in a secular manner, and we don't use that point earlier about spiritual discernment, and we bring all the gear to battle, and sometimes it's just telling God, getting some songs. These songs that we're singing, their purpose actually is to help you vocalize what you kind of want to say, but you don't know the words. So you get them out, and then you say them. That's what songs actually are supposed to be for. These psalms, they help you bring out the depths of, and some of them don't work for some situations. You look at some psalms like, this is not what I want. Keep scrolling, and then you find out, yes, this is the word. And then the weapons you bring to a particular situation, sometimes just singing over, in the mighty name of Jesus, I pray over the situation. That's what we need, as opposed to, and I'm not saying that it's not good to do planning and all the other things that we should do. We're human beings, we're crying out loud, we're not floating around our spirits all day long. You've got to do stuff, right? But they're not usually enough. We have to back them up with, or in parallel, have some prayer. Have some prayer, have some prayer. Even if it's 2 minutes, 5 minutes, those are the spiritual weapons that we bring to the battle. I remember that David had to quit all the stuff that was given to him. He just dropped them. He went back to his boring things. So the things that tend to be spiritual, they're not very, usually very exciting. They tend to cost you a bit, but they sort of are boring. But you know what? Sometimes I'm grateful for boring times, because life is not always, crescendos. If you don't have the boring for years, you probably won't have the game to bring on the day you need to bring the game. So this boring preparation that David was doing was actually the spiritual tool that he needed on the day. There are some other verses in the New Testament that you can read up later. 2 Corinthians 10:14. Our weapons are not carnal. They're not this stuff. They're spiritual. Ephesians 6:10 gives you a list of spiritual weapons. Basically is the Bible, praying, singing songs of, that's really what we should be aiming to develop in our lives as we grow in Christ. So if we do these things, we're more likely to live a life that would not be determined by or dominated by fear, anxiety, like we saw with the Israelites and Saul. Yeah. But I have a controversial point to make at the end of this message. Do all David versus Goliath battles lead to victory in this manner? No. So it is true what I believe I've said when you read the text. But I also remember from this Bible that James, the brother of John, was imprisoned before Peter and they killed him off. God executed him. It doesn't say explicitly that the church was praying for him. They did say that the church was praying for Peter, but I bet you they were praying for James as well, but he got killed. Stephen was stoned to death, even though he was just preaching the gospel. They still killed the guy. Jesus himself went through a trial that led to his crucifixion. I mean, according to the disciples, before he was resurrected, right? It looked like a bad rep. What just happened? So remember the title of this message was God is victorious, right? Will you overcome? And so maybe the David Goliath story is a sort of cheap, what's the word we use in data? Overfitting. Just sort of make it work. Make it work. Pick a story and just shove it in and say, yep, the data fits the line. The fact is that there are some data points outside this line. They don't fit. And these are the ones. These are the horrible ones. And so when you look at that and you actually see it's a bit of a mixed picture, situations remind us that it's a mixed picture. And so maybe you're asking, is God actually victorious according to me? Because according to him, apparently he's victorious. But maybe according to me, is God actually victorious? But maybe the right question that we should be asking today isn't about the actual immediate outcome. Maybe it's whose battle is it actually? Because if it's not your battle, then you have to listen to the person who's actually on the other end of the war. And then, so what am I in this story then? If it's not my battle. Actually, this takes us to the final point, that the ultimate victory, glory, is God's. It may not sound the nicest thing to say initially, but that is the truth. God is the one who has the ultimate victory and the glory belongs to him. If you think about every single message in this series, it's God is God all through the whole thing. The hero in all this stuff is God. We have many characters. You see them, Samuel, Hannah, David. But God is the one who Hannah cried to. God is the one who gave her a son. God is the one that people rejected when they said they wanted a human king. He was the one who showed them mercy. God is the righteous judge who also shows mercy. God is the one who commanded the Israelites to go wipe out the Amalekites. As heavy as that is sometimes for us, there's judgment on that one as well. If God didn't judge them, human beings would say, oh my God, look at the evil. God, what are you doing? When God judges them, we say, oh God, why did you judge them? Figure. God is the one who picked Saul from obscurity and David as well. God is the one who is reaching out to you to draw you to him. It's all God. I hope you can see that. It's all God through all these stories. The battle really, this battle we're reading about is actually the Lord. It is not ours. And that's why you see David say this actually. He could see this. 1 Samuel 17:14. All those gathered here will know that it's not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's. In the end, and this is the application, God wins anyway. In the end, God wins anyway. It's very similar to how we can see in the story of Jesus. We kind of see that, yes, God won regardless in the end. And you see this text that said, if these people, as in the spiritual demons, whatever, if they really knew what was being done, they wouldn't have killed Jesus. But God still wins anyway. And I want to challenge us a little bit on this. I think when we have situations that don't really align with David Goliath, or my silly sports story at the end where, the win is on our side, it's sometimes harder when we see it with other people that are close to us that we care about. And maybe I'm okay, but I see something that's challenging and it feels more like Stephen or something else. And we wonder, God, where's the victory in this? The question I think, the question I ask myself that I sort of leave it there is, do I believe that God cares more for this person than me? And this also came up on the Stephen Bartlett interview with John. As in, do you believe that one day when you sit in front of God, do you believe He's going to be able to make you go, I see now? Do you believe that about God? If you do, then my care for myself, the other people, is genuine, but God's care is way more than mine. And He demonstrated it by going to the cross to die for them. Would I do that for you? I'm not sure. Let's be honest. I may take some lashes, but I don't know about giving up my life. So God is not a God that's distant, that knows about your suffering from afar. He's actually done the whole distance thing and come to you and experience suffering and knows what it feels like to suffer. And not in a sort of inconvenience way. Oh, I was just inconvenienced today. I missed my tube. No, it was a death, crucifixion. So it's real pain. So there's a bit of comfort that you can have, that even if the story doesn't feel like David Goliath, God actually cares. And the battle, this big issue I'm facing, God is also in it with me. He's also suffering along with me. So am I prepared to let God's glory be front and center? When you think about the underground or the Eiffel Tower, these things are, thing of beauty. Forget the spelling list, but you know what I'm saying, like the structure and stuff, the infrastructure. I mean, it's really, really cool. There is a glory that comes with these things. You know this when you first came into the country. You're like, oh my God, it's amazing. Now you're grumbling all the time. But when you first arrived, you're like, man, this stuff is amazing. There was glory attached to it. But in this glory thing, there was some guy, I don't know, 60 years ago or 70 years ago, who was down some shaft, just knocking one screw in. Boom. Boring stuff. Boom. Now, that person was part of the army. Guys, that's our place. There are some other cool things that you do in the underground when you're making it, but the main goal is to make the tube glorious. It's not about how cool your screw is. So we shouldn't allow ourselves to get lost in the, oh my gosh, I'm down here, there's no light. If you think about the essence of what this is all about, it's a God story. And I'm in it. I'm part of His army. So we share in that glory. Today, apparently, according to Yemi, because Yemi worked for TFL once, almost every tube system in the world refers to the underground for consulting services. For as much as we may complain about it, there's something about how they did this stuff that was so amazing. So there's a glory attached to whatever battle we're going through that God ultimately gets, and the victory is His. And because we're part of His army, we then share in that glory. And it may not be just this life. That's the hard bit. But let's be real. I would rather sacrifice now for the eternity leg. If you switch it over, you've got it wrong completely. You're not my guy at work. You've got to see the true picture. This life is a precursor to the real thing. But I was thinking this morning, actually, that God is amazing, because what He's left us with in this, what we're experiencing in this life that's not the best, some people, the billionaires, would rather carry on living. So there's good in this life somehow. Even you can see, but imagine if they could see what's coming after. It's mind-blowing. So all of us need to think to ourselves, do we mind if God ultimately takes the glory, even if it appears that He's scoring an own goal for Himself in my life? If I could consult, if I can do consulting for God, I would advise Him slightly differently. Don't do it this way. Am I willing to lay down my pride of being a consultant to God and just trust that God knows what He's doing? In David versus Goliath stories, He will make David win, and therefore he wins. And in some examples, like Stephen and all these other guys, God is still victorious. This is the challenge for us. And maybe it feels like 100 meters. the distance in terms of how you reason about these questions in your head. It's okay. Maybe you go forward a little bit, maybe 2 steps. That's better than being 100. 98 is better than 100. And over time, gradually, that distance gets shorter and shorter, and that's how God allows you to build trust in Him. So He's not saying that from day one you should go from 100 to 0, but let's not do the sort of things that the children of Israel were doing, where they forgot about God, they didn't think about God first. Let's be more like David, who was boring in his prep, but in the end, even if, and there were some verses like the ones in Daniel, even if he had lost, the sort of vibe you get is, I still would not behave like my brothers. I will still trust in the Lord. That's the spirit, that's the sort of attitude that we want to cultivate and develop. So let me summarize those bullets again. So spiritual discernment, or lack of it, has consequences. We must always prepare for battle away from the limelight. Let's do the boring things and get used to doing the boring things, because actually there's joy in it. Spiritual battles require spiritual weapons. It's all good to talk and argue with people, but I don't remember anybody I actually argued with when I was at Imperial about God that decided, yep, you know what, you're right, I'll give my life to Jesus right now. It didn't happen that way. What used to happen is we'll have this argument, and then we'll go away, and then a few years later, someone would say, oh my God, I was just in the shower, and I just broke down and gave my life to Jesus. I'm like, man, you could have just given your life to Jesus when I told you about Jesus in the pantry, you know? I could claim a 10th of the glory, but no, you have to do it with you and just God. So spiritual battles require spiritual weapons. All these boring things on the side, they are significant. We can't get to where we need to get to without them. And finally, the ultimate victory and glory is God's. We're just part of God's army. Now, if we choose to say, no, I don't want to be part of God's army, that's a different message. I don't think it's a good idea. I think it's best to be part of His army and sometimes struggle with Him, argue, say, I don't want to use this weapon. There's no use the weapons. Look at all those people that are using the weapon. It makes sense. I'm like, okay, God, I'll listen to you. It's better being in the army, even if you're arguing with God. So there's some reflection questions I want to ask you. Through what lens do I view my current problems? Is it my lens or is it God's lens? How much effort am I putting into developing my relationship with God in the quiet, obscure moments? Do I rely more on church? Is my Bible reading what I've just read just now for the week? That's not good, guys. Am I prepared to ask God for help in specific areas where there are issues? Because you could basically take on, Saul's armor, or you could go back to the God armor. And then and this is key, and I want to land on this. What giant battle are you facing now? And will you put your faith, however small, in God and trust Him to help you overcome? Every single one of us, I remember in Connect, if you ask people to think about something they're facing, right now in this room, I don't want to lock faces with some of you because I know what some people are going through. Like, all sorts of crazy stuff just pop up. There are challenges everywhere. And you know what? There'll be challenges forever till we die, sadly. So we kind of have to get used to this lifestyle of depending on God. So we want to do something practical. I'm going to ask the band to come up. I want us to, as we reflect on these questions, let's sing this song. These songs are meant to help us vocalize our faith, our thoughts. Let's sing this song, Same God. Sing it, eyes closed with it, from the depth of your heart. And then when we're done singing, I'm going to ask you to gather in groups of 3, 4s, or whatever, and share something you're comfortable sharing that's a challenge. And actually, let's do a faith thing and actually pray over those challenges here. Because guess what? When we leave this room, it's more difficult to actually sit down and pray about stuff when you're on the tube or in the car and some music is coming on, or Formula 1 is on, or the match is on. These things are distractions. So let's choose to actually pray about those things now, here, after opening up to someone else. Now, you don't have to have 4 or 5 people pray over, 20 challenges. You can pick one person and just pray over these things. It was just David, right? It wasn't the whole army that took down Goliath. So just one person in your little group, pray over the challenges and submit them as Goliath in front of God and say, God, these things are horrible, the spiritual pain in my life. I want you to take care of them. Who's with me? Who's with me? All right, let's stand up and let's sing this song like we really, 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 really mean it. Because the same God who did what you saw in this text is the same God who is on the throne today. It's the same God who wants to actually do what he needs to do in our lives. So let's sing in faith, trusting in God. I'll come back in a sec.